Recording. Okay, and I think you'll all be asked to accept that recording, but we are now recording. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, my desktop, and I'm going to control the presentation as best I can, and we're going to divide up the duty here. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Always dangerous. And I'm going to put this into presentation mode. Is this something, can you all see the presentation on the screen?
Yep. Excellent.
So this is Welcome to Town Meeting, a quick start guide for new town meeting members. We're going to do this in two parts, kind of divide and conquer. Kate and I, as I mentioned, Kate has been a longtime town meeting member, and she's going to walk you through some of the more important things that you should consider in preparing for town meeting, which is coming up very soon. And then I'm going to walk you through actually participating in town meeting. And I think I'm doing the budget piece,
Yep.
Which is in part one, but I'm going to jump in there.
Yep.
So this is preparing for town meeting, and I'm going to hand it over to Kate and let her do her thing.
Okay. Thank you and welcome everybody. And I just want to say, if anyone has a question while we're going along, just, we're a small group, so you should feel free to ask. I also just want to say that for me, in my experience, sometimes in dealing with the town meeting system, you have to hear something 4 or 5 times before you sort of begin to understand what that element of town meeting is. And if that's the case, that's, just consider this one of the many, sources of orientation to town meeting. And I would encourage you to use the other sources that are made available to you as well. I'm going to talk to you about the town structure, the overview of the town structure, how to find information. I'm going to talk about the warrant and the combined reports, which you're beginning to gain some familiarity with. Paul's going to talk about the budget, and then I'm going to talk about warrant reviews. Okay, Paul.
Oh, yes.
A new slide.
Okay.
Okay. I'm actually going to circulate this tonight, I think, to the town meeting members association listserv, because this is something that, maybe you're very familiar with, or maybe you're completely unfamiliar with, but it's the org chart for the town. And the way it comes across the top, those 7 boxes at the top are the elected people, right? So if you're in one of those boxes across the top, you went to the ballot. We elect our town clerk. You guys know him, is Ben Kaufman, right? So he functions as answerable to the public. We elect the moderator, who is now Kate Poverman. She's in the 2nd year of a 3-year term. She's preceded by someone who was there for 27 years. So she is still learning the ropes. But that's an elected position. It's not been contested other than when Sandy Gatsby retired. You see some discussion of Sandy Gatsby. He's on the TMMA listserv. Town meeting, we're elected. You guys, that's one thing I know you're very familiar with. Select board's elected. That's 5 people who run the executive. School committee's elected. That means that school committee doesn't answer to the select board or to town meeting or to the moderator, right? And then you've probably noticed in the past that you voted for library trustees and housing authority and wondered why you're voting for those. And I can't give you the history of that, except that I would look under select board and you see town administrator. That's a guy named Mel Kleckner. He's been here a while as well, and he's retiring. We're going to replace that position. That position is the professional executive underneath the elected executive, which is the select board. And
he's hired by the select board?
He is hired by the select board.
Okay.
And one way to think about this, again, the select board, like town meeting, are volunteers ostensibly. They get a little stipend, but it's not a salary. It's nothing like a salary. Because we're a town form of government and not a city form of government, that's not a full-time employee who's a mayor who's really running things, right? So they're volunteers, they tap in at 5:30 PM once or twice a week, while the town administrator is a full-time job and he's paid by the town and reports to the select board. But he also, therefore, is supervising all these people. So he's a not elected official, but he supervises all these departments below him. So he supervises, I say he because it's Mel Kleckner. He supervises the staff offices in, law, planning, and so forth. He supervises the finance department. He supervises public safety, police, fire, and building, although the select board are the commissioners of police and the fire commissioners. He supervises public works, which is DPW, parks, and so forth, right? And health and human services and recreation. So all of those people do their budget processes and run through Mel Kleckner. And then Mel is at the select board meetings interpreting the departments to the select board. So that's kind of how we move to a professional staff from our elected staff, right? The school department deals directly with the school committee, which is elected, and they come to us in town meeting with a budget request, and we don't have the ability to dig into their budget request really. But I would say, and just for those who joined late, that I think perhaps the most interesting piece of the org chart is that recognition that though we as town meeting are elected, unlike a normal legislative body, we don't elect our own leader. We don't elect the speaker or the Senate majority leader. The moderator is elected by the public. And so you are going to see a lot of tension. I've never not seen the tension between the moderator and town meeting members. And you should just recognize that, there's some turf warism and different things that happen there. This is available if you just Google Town of Brookline org chart, and I would just recommend you, study it. It might help you. Okay, Paul. Yes, move along. How to find information. So you guys should have gotten this today, the updated town meeting handbook. And I really recommend you read it. I know it's dry material. Some people have, it's built off of a Massachusetts deep historic document called Town Meeting Time. It's updated by the moderator and refined by the moderator. And one town meeting member, Jennifer Goldsmith, has put a lot of work into making it accessible with that FAQ at the beginning and so forth. Some parts will be hard to understand, but at least an initial orientation and initial read is a good idea. Town meeting website. So yeah, you want to bookmark that website because the files come in through all of town meeting season, which is the 75 days from the time the warrant closes to the time we meet. And during that 75-day season, lots of documents come in and they're on that town meeting website. So I recommend that you bookmark
Hey,
that.
would you like me to pop out to that? Has everybody been to the town meeting website? Has there anybody who's not been to the town meeting website? Because we could pop out to it real quick.
I don't think we need to see it.
What's that?
I don't think we need to see it.
The only thing I would say about it is, it is this, because it is a little bit of a historical record of documents, be careful that you're opening the most recent document.
Right.
Okay, so sometimes there will be combined reports, amended combined reports, and you want to make sure you're opening the most recent one. Okay, the Town Meeting Members Association is a little bit of a peculiar body because it is a private group. And in some ways it is a private group like PAX, BBD, any other private group. But it's sort of not, it is, period. It is a private group. It has one board member from each precinct and so forth. But its membership is defined as everyone in town meeting, nobody who's not in town meeting, and everybody who is in town meeting. So in that sense, it has a sort of odd public-private status. It runs the listserv. That is the main thing it does. It does a couple of other things. They do a debrief on town meeting, which can be really helpful, especially after your first one. And they run that listserv. That listserv is moderated, but it's moderated mainly to make sure that, people, there's not kind of libel slander going on there, and that you're talking about things that are somewhat relevant to town meeting. Otherwise, it's not.
Jesse here. That website that you have listed as the second one is not really the town meeting website. That's the town meeting files link. There's actually a link above it. In other words, there's a directory higher than that 1020 town meeting files. That's actually 264 town meeting. And that actually takes you to the handbook and to the files and to the videos and to everything. You might want to update that. When it's one level higher, it's 264/town meeting.
Excellent.
This is the link, Jesse, that this has all the handbook and everything, and then the
Correct, but
file.
if you just click that little breadcrumb you have at the top there, to
Right here.
the right, that one, so that one actually has the dates and the
Gotcha.
responsibilities and the files and everything.
Good point.
I just want to say Jesse is not served in town meeting before. So
Correct.
you
That's
should be
correct.
impressed by the fact that he was able to do that. Paul, can you go forward one on that site? Oh, no, never mind. Don't worry about it. It's not important.
We're at the town meeting files.
No, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
Okay,
All I was going to say about those files is just that as I said, you want to pay attention to getting agencies. The moderator training. The moderator runs a training. It will be Monday, May 16th at 7. I recommend you go because what she says is what goes, so she's going to tell you things about how she expects things to go during town meeting. And it's what she says that's most important. The last thing
Is there someone that needs to mute, Kate? I'm sorry. There's some music in the background.
maybe Debbie here. Can you mute her there? It's your meeting. Oh, maybe Marion. Marion, could you mute?
Oh, it's Marion. Yeah, Marion, could you mute, please? Sorry, I couldn't see
okay.
her.
So then the last thing I want to say is most important in finding information is consult with humans. If you, most of you probably are starting to kind of have a circle of people you talk to inside your precinct, and that's just invaluable. I really recommend it. If you're looking for more people to talk to, you're welcome to reach out to us. Get multiple mentors, people who have been in town meeting a long time, people who are newer to town meeting. I find generally people are very, very happy to answer questions. So, consulting with humans can sometimes be a very, very fast way around having to search some chaotic set of document files, just saying, what is this and what does this mean? So highly recommend. Okay, next slide, Paul. Okay, so the warrant, 75 days in advance, a set of petitions, right? Close. So a date is set 75 days in advance of the first day of town meeting. And you need to, if you wish to have a petition go into the warrant, you need to file it with the select board by that date. Okay, so there's a funny thing in May where the election happens long after the warrant has closed. So your first town meeting you come to, you're arriving 75% of the way through the process, or whatever, 60% of the way through the process, which is a little odd for this warrant that you have. But in the fall and next year, that won't be the case. That warrant is a petition it could be by any number of people. The select board petitions, various different departments petition, the planning department petitions, Parks and Recs petition, citizens and town meeting members petition. And all they've done is they've drafted something that they wish to have added to the general bylaw, which is the rules of the town, the zoning bylaw, which is the zoning rules of the town, a resolution of town meeting, which is a sense of town meeting. We should have added to here a home rule petition, which is a request that the government of Massachusetts let us do something local here. And then the budget motion. So all of those things come in. The budget motion comes from AC. But all of those come into the warrant. So you might have received, not, this is the combined report, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But you might have first received the warrant just in its thin form. And it will have the thing that the petitioner is asking for, the petitioner's name, the thing the petitioner is asking for, and the petitioner's explanation of what they're asking for. Okay, and that's this the slimmed down version of the warrant. That petitioner's explanation is very important. It has legal significance, for example. But other explanations are going to come in later. But that's the one that comes with the initial warrant. And there's a link here to where the warrant is. And I'm trying to remember, Paul. Yeah, I think let's wait till combined reports.
This is just the warrant as listed on town meeting files.
It's eventually superseded by this item.
Right.
So go to the next page. That's the warrant comes out, as soon as it closes, a day or two later. This is the document that will be really important to have by your side or on your desktop during town meeting. Most of us take this part out and put it in a 3-ring binder. Okay. And I recommend you do that. And part of the reason is, if you've looked at anything in it so far, you'll see a lot of places where the advisory committee says a report and recommendation will be included in the supplemental mailing. And what that means is this is not complete. This is the first round. There will be a supplemental mailing, and it will come in with information on specific items in this combined report. And you'll want to add them in the right place. And this happens right up to the last day. And you'll continue to want to add things into the right place. That's why a 3-ring binder is helpful. Okay. Okay, so what is this item? Once I, as a petitioner, Anthony, who's on this call, and I have had a number of petitions together. So once the two of us as citizens put a petition in, boards are required to hear it. Okay, the two boards that are required to hear it are the select board and the advisory committee. The advisory committee might decide not to make any recommendations, but they are supposed to hear it. And you've seen there's a little controversy over the fact the select board's also supposed to hear it. Okay. In addition, some other boards may on their own initiative decide to hear it. So for example, if it's a zoning ordinance, the zoning bylaw committee is going to want to hear it, they can decide on their own initiative. And also as a petitioner, you can proactively ask to have other boards hear it. Okay, but the basic core is that the select board and the AC will have heard it. And the AC is the statutory finance committee of town meeting. It is appointed by the moderator. Remember, she is elected by the public, which gives her the authority to appoint that advisory committee. But just like her, town meeting didn't pick those advisory committee members. So sometimes they're crabby about them, but the elected moderator picks them. They do a couple of important functions. One is they kick the tires on every warrant article. So they push-pull on possible objections and concerns, and they basically vet the way any legislative committee would. So that's really important. They do that through subcommittees. Everything gets sent to a subcommittee. No, the advisory committee is not paid, Rachel, which is, this town is fueled on so much high-level volunteerism, again, because we're a town, not a city. So that advisory committee kicks all the tires by sending something into a subcommittee. It could be a zoning subcommittee or a school subcommittee or a buildings or capital expenses subcommittee. And that subcommittee of 4 or 5 people will hold a hearing, a public hearing, and that'll be all noticed the way things are supposed to be 48 hours in advance. And the public gets to speak on that warrant article. and then they will debate it out and they will produce a report. And they'll bring their report to the full advisory committee, later, days later. And the full advisory committee will then debate it, and they too will decide whether to accept the subcommittee's recommendation or not.
Okay, two quick points, just to interject for a second. So I just wanted to correct one thing. There are instances where warrant articles are not actually sent to a subcommittee. Instead, it's actually, the public hearing is held by the full advisory committee. That's rare, but it does occur. And importantly, at the subcommittee level, that's where much of the work around amending an article to refine it, make it better, maybe make it more legal, whatever the case may be. A lot of that work does get done at the subcommittee level, but could also get done at the advisory committee level. So there's a refinement process that is continual up and almost to the point of time.
Right. I mean, so the question is, do you think that, on balance, this seems to me like it would be terrible if warrant articles came to the full town meeting without going through this kind of kicking the tires process. That would be bad. The answer to Carol's question is that no, the advisory committee doesn't hold a public hearing. A public hearing is a very specific thing, which is that it's noticed you're going to speak on this topic. However, every advisory committee meeting now begins with public comment. Public comment's a slightly different thing, but you can direct it to something the advisory committee is going to consider later. So you could direct it to a warrant article they're going to consider.
And Carol's question, the answer is yes, the subcommittees are staffed by advisory committee members. So it's doled out that way. I don't think there's any actually members that are not advisory committee members.
Right. I don't know why I thought that her question was about whether it's.
Yeah, it's a little different question, but that's okay.
So anyway, so once we, okay, so Brenda has a question. In the combined report, the warrant articles I've read so far seem to have unanimous, yes, okay. It's for a number of reasons. One is that the petitioners did their homework. Another reason is when you start to look at this combined report, you'll sometimes see that there's the initial petition, and then there's the petitioner's motion. And the petitioner's motion means that after I talked to a bunch of people, I actually changed what I was going to propose here. And if I've agreed to that, it might appear as the petitioner's new motion, or it might appear as the AC motion. Because you'll go before that AC subcommittee and they'll say, I think I would like this better if you set the date back 5 years. So for example, in this turf, and for those of you following the turf thing, there's an initial warrant that says if it's a new or replacement field by 2025, it has to be X. And then the petitioner obviously got some pushback and said, okay, if it's a replacement by 2030, it needs to be X.
Right.
So clearly they willingly made that change, but they made that change because somebody like DPW said there's just no way we could do that by 2025.
And one other quick thing to add is that consider the subcommittee process. Really, it's a platform where people can come together. So the public can come and give public comment. The petitioner can hear from the public. It can hear from experienced advisory members. But it can also be from the town. The town staff comes. And sometimes a lot of these discussions happen in preparation for the subcommittee meeting. And so, some of the conflict that just naturally arises through the legislative process gets worked out through the subcommittee process, where you then have agreement. It really is, it's a place where agreement takes place through the legislative process. Sometimes the agreement doesn't happen. You'll see a divided subcommittee, you'll see a divided advisory committee, and you won't see unanimous votes. It's not always unanimous. Sometimes it's very contentious.
But it's accurate to say that it's unanimous because it's the close of a process, a close of a negotiated process. And I guess I would also say that, it's a balance. Sometimes you get to advisory and they're adding amendments in that as a petitioner, you just feel like that didn't really improve anything, but it's a process. And it's all I can say. It's not perfect, but I think the lack of such a process would be a real problem. If things were becoming law with no bodies that were evaluating, scrutinizing, kicking the tires, that would be a problem. So
And one other point, Kate, I'm sorry to interject. I was on advisory for 2 years, so it's a passion. The other thing that as a new or an existing town meeting member, you can read the combined reports and look at the advisory committee's votes. And if it's a unanimous vote, typically that article is not going to have a huge battle on the floor of town meeting over the article. But if you see a divided advisory committee or an advisory committee having a different recommendation from the select board, you can rest assured that that's probably going to be a well-debated and discussed article at town meeting.
my recommendation, again, not for this town meeting, but in general, is that as soon as the warrant arrives, you should look down the table of contents of it and make a decision about what on there interests you and your constituents. Okay, so if something is in your neighborhood, something's not in your neighborhood, but it's going to have a big impact in your neighborhood, or it's a real passion of yours, that you should make a note to yourself to attend these subcommittee meetings. Because if you want to influence in any way how a warrant article is going to appear on the floor of town meeting, you need to do it during the process. You can't do it at town meeting itself. At town meeting, you're pretty much bound to vote yes or vote no, pretty much. The choice set is formed through this process. I also want to say that, a lot of times people who are new to town meeting put a ton of work into reading the combined reports, only to discover that some of the warrant articles are not being moved, meaning they've been withdrawn effectively. And though Kate Poverman did email us and tell us what those were, I am going to tell you now, just so that you know not to pour your heart into understanding them. 15, 19, 20, and 21 are not being moved at town meeting. 15, 19, 20, and 21 are not being moved. It's possible some other things won't be moved as well, but right now, those have effectively been withdrawn. So they're here, but they're not being moved. Okay. Otherwise, it's important to read the warrant article. How did you find out which ones are not being moved? Kate Poverman actually sent, so, here's the difficulty of the TMMA listserv. At moments it has a social media quality. There's just nastiness and jabbing going on it. But it is also a platform for official information. So you can't really not ever look at it. My recommendation is read everything that comes from Kate Poverman or Sandy Gatsby or Dennis Doughty. Dennis Doughty is the chair of the AC. Kate Poverman is the moderator and Sandy Gatsby is the assistant moderator. Because what they put in has got a little bit more of it, it's official. And so Kate Poverman sent us this notice, and I'm just sure I'm sure you were just, trying to understand who people are on that list. But I'm just telling you, open things from her, consider what she's telling you official. And, she says it's not being moved, it's not being moved. Okay. Now, the way you work through something here is you'll see, you probably have already seen that the warrant article number is at the top of the page. And as I said, when the supplement comes in, you'll want to pull your thing apart and put the supplement pages in. They'll also be numbered following this system. And they'll also be they won't be white, they'll be in colors, which makes it a little bit easier. Read why the petitioner, their description. And then the select board and the advisory committee's reports are incredibly helpful. Sometimes the advisory committees will say, we voted favorable action on amended language. On amended, right? So sometimes they'll just say by a vote of 21-0, yes. But sometimes they'll say yes on amended language. And that means that they negotiated, changed language, usually with the petitioner. And that becomes the new motion. Okay.
Importantly, Kate, right, that it doesn't mean it's the only motion. sometimes the petitioner does not agree with what the advisory committee has done to their article. And the petitioner will still move their version of the article at town meeting, and the advisory committee will move their version of the article at town meeting, and town meeting will have to decide between the two.
Right. Now, if a petitioner decides to move their original motion, even though the AC has tried to put in place a substitute motion, it's a gamble as a petitioner, it's very, very helpful to work it out with the AC, whatever the objection is. And it's a gamble. However, you get to town meeting, and again, town meeting will say, well, that AC doesn't represent us, they represent the moderator. Sometimes there's, a little bit of division there, but by and large, people do trust the business sense that the AC did their due diligence, right? So it's useful to read what the AC said. But again, you're voting for yourself. Sometimes the AC's reason for voting yes is writ large, they value recreation over climate change. And if you value climate change over recreation, they're not determining your vote, right? So you just want to understand what the objection was. Okay, I think that's other questions about that. This is kind of your, this is your main document to have with you at all times to review in advance. The other thing is that you'll at
I
some
have a question.
Yes, Rachel.
So I do know that there's one warrant article that's going forward where the petitioner, I hope I have these words right. The petitioner, right, is keeping his original, whereas the advisory committee, right, had a different one. So it's like, what do I vote for? And why would you do this? Aren't you shooting yourself in the foot?
Yes.
I don't know.
What, Rachel, that's a great question. So what will happen at town meeting is if the amended version of the article is always voted on first.
Right.
So if the advisory committee modified the petitioner's article, the first vote will happen on the amended article. So AC would be voted first. If town meeting accepts that as the version that they want, then that would be moved to the main motion. However,
Why would a person keep their own in? And like, why would, it seems like that just doesn't make sense, right? How do you know what to support?
Because they may have a very specific reason, a constituency that they're trying to represent, and advisory may have a different perspective. They may have a financial perspective that their lens that they're coming from, and they're concerned about the financial impact on the town budget. But the petitioner says, you know what, this is really a significant issue, and we believe that it's more important than what the budget impact may be.
Does anything ever get passed when you have two versions?
Absolutely. So
Yes.
yeah, so absolutely. So there's many times that the advisory committee motion will be voted on and accepted by town meeting. There's many times that town meeting says, thank you for the advice advisory, but we're not going to take it. We're going to go with the petitioner's motion.
It does
And
happen.
I
Okay.
guess one thing I would say, Rachel, is that you would want to keep in mind, what is it that the advisory committee is uniquely good at? So overturning them on a budget item, personally makes me more nervous, because I feel like budgets are a comprehensive thing. Sometimes people will come in late with a motion to change the budget. And it's not that motion can't be good and well-intentioned and, and so forth, but budgets, they sync up, there's, right. So, and there's a lengthy, complicated budget process. And that's something that the AC is responsible for. But sometimes sometimes they're passing on, I really don't want to use the turf example, because that does have there is some expertise involved with turf. But I don't know, like Anthony and I brought an article last year that was to mail voter registration cards to everyone with the town census. Okay. And the AC debated it, but it was as good a debate as we here would have if I said debate it. There's no special expertise they brought to it. They decided they didn't like it. They voted against it. And Anthony and I took our main motion anyway, and we crushed it. I don't remember exactly what the vote was, but I mean, overwhelmingly yes. But the reason was that you know, as people come to the debate, they're like, what did AC bring to that topic? We can all think that topic through. Does that make sense? So really, it depends a little bit, I think that way.
Oh, that's good.
So Rachel, the advisory committee is an advisor. And town meeting always needs to remember that it's an advisor. It's not a decision-making body other than allocation of the reserve fund. But it really is just, it's a body of people with different backgrounds and perspectives and experiences that bring advice to town meeting. And sometimes, often town meeting takes the advice, and sometimes we say, thanks, but no thanks.
And
And
the
that's
other
what we
thing
do.
to remember here is that the select board, which also passes on most things, you remember from the org chart, the select board's responsible for everything that's happening in all those departments. And so often our warrant articles are adding a burden to the bureaucracy. I mean, they are like, now go in and check to make sure that people have this much setback and that they've got the flowers right and the scooters are a foot away or whatever, you know, whatever it is that we've asked for, some department has to do it. And so the select boards, I mean, first of all, always consult with the departments when you bring a warrant article, but the select board is the one that is kind of trying to think through how that might influence it. I want to say one more thing, Paul. I'm going to talk more about warrant review in a
Yeah,
second.
I didn't, I was
But
clicking. to get
even
ready.
though we put it a little out of order, but let me just say that there will be many bodies in the coming weeks that will go through this with you. Not us, because we're just trying to orient you to all of town meeting, but that will go through each warrant article with you. And some of those are within precincts. So precincts do it, right? Precinct caucuses do it. Certain political organizations do it, like Brookline. Certain political organizations will do a warrant review. The League of Women Voters does one. That's really important. And the Town Meeting Members Association does one. They tend to only cover big articles.
Right.
But one thing I always like about the precinct-based one is that you have an advisory committee member there ordinarily. And she's usually able to say to you, let me explain why the background of this debate. This, you know, there were two years ago, there was another warrant and that warrant is expiring. And if we don't do something, we have to, or there are state funds at stake. There's sometimes stuff that the person who's on advisory in your precinct, and everyone has one, can tell you. It's also the case that people do drop into each other's warrant reviews. So we'll have one in precinct 1, but sometimes there will be something really complicated that was brought by someone in precinct 10. And we'll say, we're inviting you as petitioner to come to our warrant review and sell it to us, explain it to us. Warrant reviews aren't designed to reach an agreement. They're not designed to say you should vote X or Y. They're just designed to get you to understand the warrant, right? And you could, you know, I advise you to go to as many as you can. It'll be so much better prepared. I can't emphasize that enough. Really important.
Right.
Preparation.
And you will get things dropped on your doorstep. You'll get something in the mail. PACs will make recommendations on how to vote on warrant articles.
Green Caucus.
There's a lot of special
Brookline
interest
Equity
groups.
Coalition. A lot of groups will say, will give advice. Are we doing a warrant, or is BBD doing a warrant review? I don't think we are,
We're not.
Carol, because I think the thing is we'll probably send something out that this Article 10 is to fund the comprehensive planning process. I think, you know, given the election results, it's kind of hard to imagine that warrant Article 10 is going to have trouble. We're going to have a recommendation on that, I assume, Paul, but.
Yeah, but we're not doing a comprehensive warrant review. Again, our lane is zoning and growth. And, you know, we're pretty specific on what we've been communicating about that. But as Kate said, look to your precinct, look to the League of Women Voters. If your precinct isn't doing one, see if you can get into someone else's. I mean, come to precinct 1. We'll be happy to have you.
And you can exactly ask to go to other people's, go to more than one. And you know, I am always, I mean, I'm not an authority on anything, but I'm always available to answer any questions. If anyone ever wants to just reach out and say, why do these two groups that seem similar have different recommendations on this? And, you know,
Right.
you know, it's all stuff you'll need to sort through, you know. But yeah,
So,
go back and
good.
do budget, Paul.
yeah,
Yes, Rachel.
Paul gets to do the budget. I had given it to Kate and she pawned it back on me. So first, is there any questions before, I'm going to get into the budget and then go into town meeting. Any other questions on what Kate, there was a ton of information there before, because we're going to kind of switch topics. Any other questions before we move on? No, okay, so,
One other thing, I would, in addition to going to your precinct warrant review, get out of your precinct bubble as well. So don't just go to your, don't just go to the precinct driven warrant review, but make sure you get to that League of Women Voters or TMMA, because the precincts definitely, it's important because you have your local interests, but precincts become bubbles, so.
Question,
So-
Kate, about a half hour ago, you mentioned when you were showing the org chart that there's a potential tension, I think you used the word, between the moderator and whom again?
Well, so here was this basic idea. You're going to walk into the virtual auditorium, and there's somebody running the meeting, and your model for that in Congress or in state legislatures is that the person running the meeting has been chosen by the body. We're a legislative body. It's a prime minister. It's a speaker of the House. Right. So we're part of a same caucus, right? But in town meeting, that moderator and thereby the AC she appoints have not been picked by the body. This is not, I'm not saying that makes in some ways the moderator's more legitimate. The moderator's been elected townwide, right? And by thousands of votes, whereas we've been elected by like 250 votes or whatever it is. So, but you'll see a lot of testing of the authority of the moderator, and the moderator, it just is a different relationship than the one you might be used to seeing if you watch legislative processes. That's all I can say. You'll get a feel for it immediately. I'm just trying to explain that part of the reason is that the moderator is independently elected, not elected by the body.
Just maybe one other comment. You mentioned about the TMMA listserv, and you talked about how important it was to sort of weed out the important emails and announcements and alerts from everything else. There seems to be, at least in my initial week at this, way too much chaff in there. I mean, I was going to just drop out of it because I felt that already I was getting inundated, sort of almost unfairly. Like you join as a new town meeting member, and whatever topic's coming up, there's seems to me like a group of 10 or 15 people that are debating it hotly for, screens and screens of emails, and trying to look out for the Kate Poverman emails or the Sandy Gadsby's or Heather Hamilton's. It becomes almost difficult to try to even find the good ones. Almost like they need a separate way of coming to town meeting members than that particular group.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. Let me tell you, all I can say is I can just tell you how people handle that. People often set up a separate email address for town meeting. There is a way you can request it by digest.
Mhm.
Is this sort of, and there's also a way that you can look at it on a website instead of receiving it by
Right,
that.
sure,
email.
yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I mean, I have set up a separate email address for it. And I don't read it all. I mean, there's a lot of people who are there. Look, it's a body and it's politics.
Yeah,
There's a lot of jabbing stuff that goes on there, and you're pointing to something which is true, which is if I just want information, I have to go through that stuff. But it is politics, I mean.
But there are ways, Jesse, as you know, I think you have a tech background, to be able to, flag emails from specific individuals and raise them importance in your inbox. But it is, right now, this is the system we have. Official notices go to the TMMA. So it's, if you do turn it off, you may miss a last minute, nightly digest that's important for an amendment that may happen. So just know that, and there is, and as you get closer to town meeting, there'll be a lot of, pro and con discussion about articles. That sometimes is really helpful.
Really helpful.
It's really helpful. So I would encourage you not to turn it off. Get through this cycle, maybe through November, and then make an assessment of how to best leverage the resource. But the good, the bad, and the ugly, it's still a positive resource ultimately for your experience in town meeting.
Like we'll be talking a lot about turf, and you can tell. And I feel like if I have a warrant article that I'm going to be talking about at some point, but I'm not going to start talking about it while people are thinking about turf. So in the couple of days before something is heard, you'll hear more about it. And it shortens town meeting because some real discussion is done.
So I'm going to move on. So one of the very important things that town meeting does is it approves the budget. So that budget, I think, is 360 this year, million. I have to go back and look, but I know it's a lot of money. And town meeting is asked to approve the budget. And the first thing you should know about the budget is that there's an incredible amount of work that is done to prepare and present the budget to town meeting, right? This is a long process. It's a deep process. It's a process that, since I've been involved in town meeting, has only gotten better and more transparent. There's still a lot more work to be done in that regard, but it is a pretty extensive process. It starts, and I'm going to run through this real quick. It starts back in the early fall, where department heads, under the direction of the town administrator, Mel, at this point, they prepare their budgets. And those budgets are brought to the town administrator. And then late in November and early December, there are budgets reviews. The select board will review each budget. They will hold a public hearing for each departmental budget. And those hearings get public input, and people ask for more of this or a little bit more of that, or they move things around. That does impact the budget. So it is important during the year to pay attention to those, because the time to influence the budget is while the budget's being developed. It's a lot harder to go change the budget after it's already been baked in, because we have to pass a balanced budget, and once the money is allocated to one department or an item to move it, it has a domino effect. So the time to influence the budget is early in the process, as early as you possibly can. The town administrator in February submits the financial plan to the select board in the advisory committee, and you get this book. I can't show it to you on my screen right now, but you should have a budget book. Did everybody get the budget? Did you guys get a budget book sent to you? Kate, can you hold yours up, please? It looks like this. Okay, well, that gets mailed out to all town meeting members, and that thing drops on our doorsteps. And it's a good resource to have. It's probably 1.5 inches thick, and it goes through every department. And then the advisory committee kicks in the February timeframe, late February, often early March, and they start holding budget reviews with each department. And the advisory committee actually has started to modify its approach to this. But typically what occurs is that each department has a public hearing with the advisory committee. They present their budget, questions are asked. And frankly, not often, often not many changes are made, frankly. That's been one of the questions that have been asked by a number of town meeting members is, well, why is that the case? If it's a financial advisory committee, shouldn't they be making more suggestions? And I think that's something that is actually starting to happen more and more now. And then finally, in late May, the annual appropriation gets done, which is the budget will be presented at town meeting, and you will be asked to vote on it. Marianne, do you want me to stop so you can ask a question? You have to unmute yourself.
I wanted to know whether there's any long-range budget thing, because we keep hearing about a structural deficit, and I'm wondering where and how that gets discussed and how that fits into this.
That is a great question. There was a group formed called the Brookline Financial Advisory Committee, or Council, I think it was committee. It was formed and did an extensive review of the finances for the town long-term and came up with a number of recommendations to the select board and others. And the town is in a various state of adoption / denial about where it's at. I guess is to put it kindly. You will hear during this town meeting a report from I don't know what it's called, but it was a moderators committee put together to review the BFAC recommendations and where each board and commission was at in their adoption of those recommendations. So you'll hear that during this town meeting. But to say, in summary, Marion, we really haven't done a great job. We've gotten better at the longer term financial planning, but not to the extent where we have a clear understanding about how we're going to deal with a structural deficit, perhaps through regular operating overrides. I hope that answers your question. So I guess the point of this slide here is the budget goes through a lengthy process of being created, presented, public input, it gets refined, there's public hearings, and then eventually it gets presented to you at town meeting. I think let me go to the next slide here. Oops, I lost that. And this is a super slimmed down version of the budget. But the major components of the budget are, there's a town side to the budget, and you'll hear this, the town side, the school side. It's really not two sides, it's one budget, but the town has a portion of the budget. I think it's around 40% at this point of the total budget. I think schools gets about 60%. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's essentially the split right now. But the town side deals with all the operational stuff, streets and sidewalks and parks and recreation and police and fire and things like that. And then the school side deals completely with the schools. And town meeting can only vote the top line of the school number. So on the town side, you as a town meeting member could actually make a motion to amend the budget to move some money from one line item in the town budget to another line item in the town budget. So let's say you wanted to move money from a bucket and I'm not even gonna make a suggestion. You can move money around on the town side. As a town meeting member, you do not have that ability on the school side of the budget. Town meeting only approves the top line number of the school budget. The specific line items, that's the responsibility of the school committee and the school department to allocate those monies. And that's an important thing to understand, because if you want to influence the school budget, you really need to start early in the process with the school department while they're developing their budget, because you can't adjust it at all at town meeting. You can do it on the town side. It's not recommended that you make a budget motion at the last minute at town meeting, because it does cause a lot of angst because often we don't understand the implications of what it means to move money around the last point. And then there is something called the CIP. It's the capital improvement plan. And these are monies that are allocated for capital projects like, refurbishing parks, rebuilding a footbridge, doing major school renovations, things of that nature. The budget is online. I don't know if you have had a chance to go see it, but I'm going to click on this just for fun. It is available online. It's actually pretty good. It's interactive. It essentially starts with a budget policy message from the town administrator. It goes through various summaries on the operating budget, And then on the revenue side, and then it goes into specifics around departments. And you can go through each department here and see, what their budget is, what they're doing for staffing, what they're increasing, so on and so forth. And they have this thing called budget stories, and each department writes an overview of, what they've accomplished last year and what their objectives are for this year. And I would suggest that if you don't have the budget book, which it sounds like you don't, you may want to spend a little bit of time on, on the online version of the budget. And the school department has a very similar website as well. And you can go through their budget. Here they have a full presentation that you can walk through to understand the budget. And then they do a good job at documenting all the various versions of the budget from when they first started creating it. So you can see here, there's a FY23 preliminary budget for March 17th. And then the last version they have posted is April 27th. So those are, that's available for you as well. As I mentioned, town meeting can amend the town side budget with 48 hours notice. So you could, in fact, it's not recommended, you could file an amendment to the budget within 48 hours of the budget being heard at town meeting. I think it's only been done once that I'm aware of. And the outcome wasn't really great. And then again, town meeting approves the total school budget only. And most importantly is we have to pass a balanced budget. So, if we move money, if we take money from one thing, it's to move it to somewhere else. It has to come from somewhere. So if you want to increase a budget item, it has to be taken away from something else. We do have to pass a balanced budget. The budget's pretty complicated. The advisory committee, Dennis Doughty will give a presentation on the budget. The advisory committee is actually the body that makes the motion, that submits the budget for the town. Ultimately, that's why it's called the finance committee. And Dennis Doughty will give an extensive presentation on the budget. Then the school department will give, the school superintendent actually will give the presentation for the school's budget. There'll be a lot of questions. Typically, as a town meeting member, you have an opportunity to ask any department head a question about their department. And oftentimes people will say, why is this park not fixed? Or why are the roads in disrepair? So you'll get there'll be a bunch of questions by town meeting members for various department heads. I'd strongly suggest to you that if you do have a question about a specific department, email or get a hold of the department head ahead of time, instead of surprising them with a question on the floor of town meeting, especially if it's something that might need a little more digging into. It's often good courtesy to reach out to the department head and let them know that you're going to ask a question and give them a chance to gather the information so that they can provide you with an informed decision. That is about what I want to tell you about the budget. Any questions about the budget? I'm sure you have a lot, but I'm going to move on to life in town meeting.
Yeah, Paul, how are
Yeah.
they going to deal with the fact that we don't have a contract with the teachers yet? How does that impact the budget discussion and what we're voting for?
It really doesn't my understanding, and I was on the school finance subcommittee of AC, is that the teachers don't have a new contract. Without a new contract, the existing contract is basically what they're working off of. But the not having a new contract really doesn't impact the budget, other than there may be some unknowns as we're approving the school budget that may be insufficient
So Marion,
to
yeah, I'm
support
sorry.
what the teachers union wants.
And Marion, in all the warrants, there's this placeholder for collective bargaining. So warrant Article 2 says approval of collective bargaining agreements. And that is often a placeholder in case something happens. Isn't that right, Paul?
Yeah, and the question is whether that reserve is sufficient enough to satisfy whatever, the union's going. But the bigger concern is really not what's going on, at least on the budget side. There's a lot of issues with the negotiation. The bigger issue is that there's a a significant budgetary gap with the school budget that's being filled by ARPA money, which is one-time money. So we're kind of kicking the can down the road, and I'm sure that will be discussed at town meeting at length. Okay. All right, I'm going to keep rolling because we're going to start pressing up against time. So this is what it's like to participate in town meeting. This is a primer. You know, there's a few key things that we want to talk about. First is a conflict of interest training. I'm pretty certain you're required by law, at least by bylaw, that you take conflict of interest training. There's actually, now that I remember, there's also, I think, a bylaw or resolution that suggests you take some financial training as well around the budget for town meeting, and those will get offered at some point. I'm going to talk you through the process of Zoom registration and logistics of actually entering town meeting. There's some practical matters that you're going to need to deal with. Talk a little bit about the various roles that that take place by individuals and groups at town meeting, what the proceedings are like and what the voting will be done, how that happens mechanically, and then closing with some town meeting etiquette. So first, I'm basically providing you a link. Has anybody received the conflict of interest information yet from?
Okay,
From
what
the
I got
moderator?
from Sandy is that and from Kate is that it's urged, but it's not required unless you're on one of the committees or the boards.
Right. I think if you're on advisory, you're absolutely required to take it, but this is strongly encouraged to take it. And this link will take you to it. It's not a huge investment of time, and it's well worth I think the 30 minutes or so. That it
But
would
there
take you.
hasn't been anything about officials saying this is what
Okay,
you
so
should
maybe
take.
I
You
may have been-
You could jump onto the municipal one.
Yeah. So it's strongly encouraged, and I thought it was required, but that's because I came at it from an advisory committee standpoint. It is required for advisory and other bodies, but this is really an excellent place to go, just because it helps you understand the perspective that you're coming from, and also more importantly, others that are coming to petition and speak to town meeting. So the day of, so Zoom registration. So these are, Anthony, you have your hand up.
So my understanding was that it was required. I don't remember who sent out a link to the TMMA, but I think the municipal one is required. And when you go to the website, it says if you're an elected
Official.
member, then you do need to do it.
Yeah, there's a little bit of
I asked the
quirkiness.
question specifically privately to, I don't know, to one of them, and I got to Sandy and I got back no.
Yeah, I mean, I think.
Pretty clear answer.
Yeah, it's strongly
Not state
encouraged.
law.
And for
It's
the
not
state,
state law, but Anthony, I know what you're saying. I think we recommended it. It may have been a resolution of town meeting.
right, there was a
Yeah.
resolution for that, and also for some financial education as well. So, look, strong recommendation that you err on the side of taking it, because it really does help you understand what you may need to have to reveal should you present something or represent something at town meeting, and also what other speakers should be doing as well. It's an important part. So Zoom registration and logistics. So you're going to participate in town meeting over Zoom. And it's a little bit different than being in person. So on the day of each town meeting, you're going to get an email from the chair of the advisory committee, that's currently Dennis Doughty, with an invitation to register for the Zoom session for town meeting. Right when you get it, you should register. Don't hang on to that and try to register at the last minute. You should register right away, and you will get a confirmation email with a link to the Zoom session for town meeting. Find a way to bookmark that email or an easy way to get back to it, because I assure you, when you're rushing around trying to get on to town meeting, you're going to be searching high and low for that email so that you can get the link.
Dennis Doughty.
Dennis Doughty is, yeah, you can search on Dennis Doughty. You could flag it in your email. You could put it in a special folder, but find a way. You could cut and paste it and put it in your calendar, which is essentially what I end up doing. But find a way to get easy access to it because you don't want to be rushing around. Town meeting starts at 7 p.m. each night. And remember, you're going to get this registration each time. So it's not one registration for all of town meeting. Every session, every day, you're going to get an email to register. So you have to do that. It's strongly recommended that you log in at least 30 minutes before. I think I saw someone say on the team an hour before. There's nothing wrong with logging in early because then you can just walk away from your computer. You have your video off, you have your audio off. Why log in early? Well, there's a technician that's behind the scenes having to check in every single town meeting member and other individuals that are logging into the session. So if you wait to 5 minutes to 7 or 10 minutes to 7 or 7 o'clock, you're going to miss the first few moments or period of time at town meeting because it does take the technician time to be able to work through the queue. So do yourself a big favor, bookmark that email, click on that thing at 6 o'clock or 6:15 or 6:30, get there early. You'll be in there early enough and then you won't have to worry about it. There is an option to participate by phone. When you get the invitation, you can choose to dial in. And there's, for every town meeting Zoom session that I've been on, there's always been a couple of people that have participated by phone. And just know that I don't know all the logistics of it. It'll be in the explanation. But if you do choose to participate by phone, when it's time for you to vote, the moderator will actually call your name and you will unmute your phone and the moderator will ask you how you're voting and you will say yes, no, or abstain. So it's different than having to click the button. Importantly, be aware of your Zoom background. There's just some things that you need to pay attention that you often don't think of. You can see my background right now is blurry. This is a capability in Zoom. Some people use a picture of their favorite background. Others just make sure that the back of their whatever we're viewing is neat and clean, or maybe they don't care. But just know that whatever's going on in the background, all of town meeting is going to see it, and it's going to be broadcast on cable over big with over cable and whatever the internet. You just need to pay attention to it. It's also important, I think in the handbook, it does describe this. There really shouldn't be any political insignia or any other politically oriented backgrounds or buttons. Or if you walked into town meeting, for instance, with an oversized button that said, I support, tall people that are purple with green hair, you might be asked to take that button off because it might be considered a political button. The same with Zoom backgrounds. Your Zoom background should be kind of non-political in nature is the recommendation. Although sometimes that rule has been broken. The other thing is that there will be technical assistance online. So when you get into the Zoom session, you want to have your chat box open because there's someone called the chat monitor. The chat monitor will send you information about what's going on with town meeting. You can ask the chat monitor for some assistance. The chat monitor will publish information about the helpline. So if you need help, you can actually, and you're having technical problems, you can call a number and they will help you figure out what's going on your end to make sure that you can participate in town meeting. So that's some of the technical roles that go on. Here's some other roles. My screen is blocking, so I can't see it. As Kate said, the moderator's role is to be the presiding officer over town meeting. What the moderator says essentially goes. When the moderator says we start, we start. When the moderator says we end, we end. The moderator is the official overseeing it. Town meeting members, which are us and you get to vote on matters that come before town meeting. And you have a yes vote, you have a no vote. You have an abstention that you can use, and you can also blank. You don't have to vote. You could have a blank. That would consider to be almost an absence. The town clerk is present for town meeting, and if you were in person, the town clerk would be sitting up on the stage and would be recording every vote that's taken. The town clerk is actually on the stage, but is on Zoom, and Ben Kaufman will be recording all of the votes that are taken on each motion of the evening up to the point where we adjourn, because there is a vote to adjourn. The Select Board Advisory Committee are there. Again, they hold public hearings and they present reports on each article. So those are the formal presentations bodies. There may be other speakers that will present as well, but the Select Board and Advisory Committee essentially by statute, by bylaw, are required to review articles and present. I think we might have heard a little about that on the TMA this week, that they are required to do it. But I think there's been some changes to that this year to try to be a little more efficient. The department heads, as I have mentioned, each department head does attend town meeting during the budget, typically during the budget process. Sometimes they're available if an article is going to be specific and impact their department or their subject area. The department heads are there, and you'll have an opportunity to ask the director of public works or the police chief or the fire chief questions about their department and their budget. The public, of course, is there observing. They're not able to vote. They can either observe through participating in town meeting, or they can watch it on BIG through broadcast or on Facebook. It's also, you can watch it on Facebook. And then, as I mentioned, there'll be a bunch of technical assistants. Typically, there's an audiovisual assistant. So like Kate's going to give has a warrant article. I assume she may have some PowerPoint slides for that warrant article. The audiovisual assistant will have those slides and will move them the way I've been moving the slides along. As I mentioned, there'll also be a Zoom chat monitor, and then there'll be a helpline. And also there is an assistant moderator. So Kate Pugman's a moderator, and Sandy Gatsby has been appointed for, I think since last year, an assistant moderator. And he's there to help if the moderator needs to take a break, or if the moderator finds that she's in conflict with an article for some reason, she would hand it over, the moderating for that specific article over to the assistant moderator. So proceedings and voting, these are kind of just the nuts and bolts of what you're going to experience each day. Typically, the moderator will publish a schedule of the articles that she anticipates will be taken up during the next day of town meeting. The schedule doesn't always work perfectly. Sometimes we go long, we don't get to everything that we'd like to. Sometimes articles actually, there's a motion to move an article to another day. So if a petitioner finds that they have an issue that's come up, perhaps they have a number of speakers that from the public that they were hoping to have join them, and those speakers can't attend the night that it's scheduled, the petitioner can make a motion to move an article to a specific day or after a day. So sometimes the best laid plans are for naught, and they do change it. It can change at the last moment. But you should have a sense of what articles you're going to need to focus on for the first night, for the second night, and so on. The way that the debate typically happens is for each article, the article will be announced by the moderator. She will read it, what the motion is. The advisory committee will then get up and give their report on the article, and that's usually a pretty quick summary. It can be anywhere between 3 and 5 minutes. The select board would then give their report on the article, so their perspective and recommendation. The petitioner would then have an opportunity to speak and present the article, their point of view on why they're bringing the article forward. This could be anywhere from 3 minutes to 10 minutes, depending on the level of complexity of the article. And it could be one or more speakers. And then the moderator will then move into a period of speakers that are for and against the article. So if there's an article that you're interested in that you want to speak on, let's say the turf article or Kate Silbaugh's article, you need to send an email to the moderator and let her know that you want to speak either for, in favor, or against the article that you want to speak for, and she will put you on the speakers list. And when, after the petitioner speaks, the moderator will then go into a period of time where she's going through a list of speakers. First person for the article, then a person against the article, person for the article, then against the article. And that could go on for some time. The other thing that happens is that if you were in town meeting in the auditorium, there's three microphones at the end of the aisles, just in front of the stage. And people start to line up behind the microphone. And that line is getting in line to either typically to ask a question. Some people make comments. It's really meant to ask a question. But people will line up behind the microphone. The way that that's done at town meeting is done virtually through the chat session. And you'll type into the chat to the chat monitor that you would like to ask a question or make a comment. And the chat monitor will essentially put you in a virtual line. And at some point, the moderator is going to say, okay, we've heard from 7 people, pro and con. Let's get to the microphone. Let's get to questions. And the moderator will start working her way through town meeting members that want to ask questions. So if you did not send an email to Kate Fulverman, the moderator, and said you'd like to speak on Article 10, that's not your last chance. At town meeting, you could get in the queue to ask a question and have an opportunity to speak at town meeting on that article as well. However, there is a risk that you may not be able to speak because eventually someone's going to say, call the question. And call the question means we've had enough of the debate. It's now time to vote. And when there's 2 paths that can happen. When someone says, I want to call the question, the moderator decides whether the question should be called at that point. Sometimes the moderator will say, you know what? I don't think we've heard enough debate on this. We haven't heard enough pro and con. I still have 15 people in the queue. And she'll just say, we're not going to call the question yet. We're going to keep going. Eventually, someone's going to ask again, call the question. And at that point, the moderator may say, okay, I will entertain calling the question. And she will read off the names of everybody that's still left to speak in the question queue. And sometimes, depending on who's in the queue, if there's a long list of people that still would like to speak, when the question actually gets put to a vote, town meeting may vote it down and they'll want to hear. And Kate, I think it's a 2/3 vote, right, to call the question?
It is.
It's a 2/3 vote. So 2/3 of town meeting has to vote to end debate. So some nights the call the questions goes on and on and on, and we finally end up getting to vote. Usually on the most contentious articles, the call the question doesn't happen right away and the debate develops. Once the question is called and town meeting votes at a 2/3 level to vote on the article, the moderator will then read the motion. And again, I think earlier I had mentioned that there could be a motion by the advisory committee. That would come first, which should be the amended motion. You would vote on that. The moderator will read the language. Importantly, very importantly, Kate mentioned to you about the 3-ring binder. The moderator will say, on page 17-2, the pink sheet of your whatever, you're going to need to find that. That's why it's important to stay organized with your combined reports, because a number of these sheets will come out the night of town meeting. They'll mail them to you, and you may get it the day before. But sometimes if it's a last minute thing from advisory, it may be in your email from the TMMA. And so the moderator will tell you where this is. She will read the language of the motion, and then she will ask you to vote. And the vote is done electronically over Zoom. It's pretty straightforward. She will do 1 or 2 tests of voting. We'll have some crazy question like, should we land on Mars in the next 5 years? And that'll be the question. You'll get to vote on that as a test. So you will be asked to vote. You want to be on your Zoom screen. You want to have your Zoom open, of course. And a question will pop up on your screen, a pop-up window, and it will ask the question of the motion, and you'll have a choice of voting yes, no, or abstain. Or you could do nothing. If you do nothing, you'll have a blank as a recorded vote. If you're on the phone, as I had mentioned, if you need to dial in by phone, the moderator will, once everybody votes, the moderator will then say, we'll go to the queue of people that are on the phone and we'll call your name, and your phone will be unmuted and you will give your answer. Paul Warren, precinct 1, yes. That's how you would respond. Paul Warren, precinct 1, no. And you'd give your vote, and that'll be recorded. Importantly, the next day, the town clerk will send an email out, a spreadsheet with everybody's vote. It's really important that you check the spreadsheet, that your vote was recorded properly. It does happen where, for even in the auditorium, the little device that you use to record your vote malfunctions, and either you're not recorded, or the opposite of what you voted was recorded. So you do want to check that. If you find an error, you can send an email to the town clerk and say, Mr. Kaufman, I was not recorded properly on warrant Article 10. Please put me down as a Y. Importantly, this is not an opportunity for you to change your mind. If you slept on it and decided, oh gosh, I really wish I voted no on that thing, that's not the purpose of checking the vote, right? This really is if you had made an error. If you were in the auditorium, you have a short period of time after the vote to actually walk up to the stage and say to the clerk, I saw on the screen that I was recorded as a yes, and that should have been a no. Please change my vote. But that's usually done pretty quick. You wouldn't be able to do it the next day. So that's voting. Any questions on voting before I get into the town etiquette stuff? Does it make sense? Pretty straightforward. It's a lot of fun. Okay, so just some etiquette for town meeting. The first is how you address others. The moderator is Madam Moderator or Mr. Assistant Moderator. Typically, you use their title. You'd say, Select Board Member Green or Town Council. You're generally using their title. You could use their title and their last name, but you're generally not calling out, thank you, Kate, to the moderator. It would be, thank you, Madam Moderator. When you're raising questions or you're making comments, or even if you're speaking in support or against a particular article, it's strongly encouraged that you write your remarks down. You're gonna, even if you don't sign up ahead of time, if you think that you're gonna speak in the queue, and it usually takes some time for them to get to you, it doesn't hurt for you to write down what you're gonna say. Because trust me, I have the gift of gab, and if I don't write it down, I can go on and on and on. So I often have to be told to stop talking. So I would strongly suggest you write it down. Typically, you're given 3 minutes to speak. So if you sign up to, even if you sign up to speak ahead of time in favor or against an article, the moderator will give you 3 minutes. You can ask for an extra minute or two. Be judicious with that if you are going to use it. 5 minutes is a long time to speak at town meeting. Typically, it's 3 minutes. If you can do it under 3 minutes, that'd be awesome. We as your town meeting colleagues, we would appreciate it if you kept it short. Importantly, if someone in the queue says something ahead of you that you are going to say, you have two options. You can stay in the queue, and when they call on your name, you can say, I completely agree with my colleague about that item, and that's it. You're just confirming what they said, or you could drop out. But you do not need to repeat what someone else has said. It makes things drag out quite a bit. Discuss ideas, not people. Again, it's pretty bad form to go after individuals. It makes them uncomfortable. It makes you uncomfortable, and everybody else in the auditorium or the Zoom go, oh, that wasn't fun. And then, as I had mentioned earlier, if you do have a question for a department head, especially if it has any complexity to it, it may need some research, reach out to the department head ahead of time and say, I'm going to ask you this question. It'd be really great, if you could help me understand it more. And you will build goodwill by doing that versus surprising them on the floor of town meeting. They have long days when they're at town meeting, and a tough question without a heads up can sometimes not be fun. So, town meeting dates and times. May 24th is the big date. That's the first night. And then you can see what we have for May and June. It would be really great if we didn't have to use 8 and 9. So all these dates are reserved, but it doesn't mean we're going to use them. It depends how long it takes us to get through the business of town meeting. If we go to June 9th, everybody's going to be pretty crispy. They'll want to be done. On a rare occasion, we've actually had to go longer. I think the last town meeting we went a little bit longer. We started to bump up against, I think, some legal limits of when town meeting could actually pass what it needed to pass. And as I said, all dates may not be used. And last and not least, town meeting starts at 7 p.m. Try to log in at 6 or 6:15 or 6:30 at the latest. So with that, I think I'm done. Hands, questions, comments. You guys all look tired. 8:30, we finished right on time, 8:31.
Yeah, Paul, thank you very much for
Pam.
setting this up.
Pam, go ahead.
Just to confirm, the final stuff that's going in our 3-ring binder, we don't have yet, right?
Right.
Right, so what's gonna happen is, get a 3-ring binder and take the combined reports and break it into, and get tabs and create a tab for each article, okay? Warrant Article 1, Warrant Article 2, Warrant Article 3. And then you're gonna start getting mail from the town clerk, from the town, and they will send you these colored sheets.
Okay.
And so, for example, if you look in the combined reports right now, I think the article about leaf blowers says that the advisory committee report will come as in a supplement. So you're going to get a supplement at some point. It will certainly come at least the day that we're going to take the article up. Hopefully it'll come a little before so you can read it in a little bit more detail.
Okay.
When you get that little pack, it's going to be an envelope. There's going to be 3 or 4 items in there. Sort them out and stick them in your 3-ring binder.
Okay.
And those will be different colored. And the moderator may even say, okay, we're going to discuss Article 10. Please go to the pink sheet, page 17 - whatever,
Okay.
and you'll know how to get there. Okay. Any other questions?
How
Was
long
this-
do the meetings,
What's that?
how long? It's Debbie. How long do the meetings go? Do they go like, is it?
They start
11
at
midnight?
7. It's very
start-
precise.
yeah.
They start at 7,
Yep,
and we will not start a new article after 10:30.
okay.
And they always try to time it so that you're ending around 10:30. Sometimes it's 10 minutes. before,
Okay,
10 minutes before, but and sometimes it's 10 minutes after that or something, but she won't take up something that's going to take an hour at 10 o'clock.
But sometimes things can go long. So, I think we've sometimes had it go to 11 o'clock. And depending if
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 you
we're
start
at
it,
the
you'll
point,
finish.
if we're at the point on the second to last night of town meeting, if it looks like we could complete the business of town meeting the second to last night and save ourselves having to go to another night, the
Right.
moderator may ask, or the moderator may be pressed by town meeting to say, let's continue. And a whole bunch of people that are really tired might go, no, thank you. We'd rather just do another night because it's 10:45 and we're beat. So they can be long nights. But it'll be great fun and very interesting.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, hopefully this was helpful. Is this something that you found, was this helpful? Good.
Yeah, very
okay.
helpful. Thank you for
Great.
setting
We
it
need
up.
to be able to
Thank you
offer it
so
to
much.
others, so.
Thank
So Paul, for people, for some precincts that don't have an advisory committee member, are they going to put somebody on? When do you need, it's like advisory committee's already happened, right, for
Right.
this cycle? So we don't need anybody right now, right?
Yep, so I would expect, one, I don't speak for the moderator. The moderator could do whatever she plans to do. I do know that the expectation is that each precinct has some representation. Sometimes that representation is not available in the precinct, depending on what type of gap or experience or capability is required on the advisory committee. Sometimes you'll have a precinct that doesn't have somebody for a session or two. But given the rejiggering of all the precincts, I'm sure that the moderator's busy working to identify individuals to bring on town meeting. And listen, it hasn't always been a rush, right? There hasn't been an inundating people volunteering to jump on advisory.
But Carol, I mean, if you're, I think we should just have a conversation offline if you're worried about kind of wanting to have some expertise at your warrant review. We might be able to just say, here's some advisory committee
Oh, that's a
members.
different question. I think.
Yeah,
I'm
well, I was
sure
going to
that-
go to that question next.
Yeah.
Might be
I think
willing to help.
Brenda and Pam and I are like back chatting and going, how do we get somebody else to do that?
So someone,
That's like,
I'm
when is it
certain.
gonna happen?
Yeah, so Carol, I would expect that given the number of advisory committee members, I would hope that there's an advisory committee member that would be willing to potentially participate in your warrant review.
Right.
If not, call me and I'll do it because I've been on advisory, but I'd have to get up to speed on all the stuff that they've done. But there's got to be, I think it'd be, you could potentially find someone to maybe help out. We can help you twist an arm or two. Okay,
Guys, go enjoy your dinners. Maybe go
Yes.
to the moderators thing and go to the League of Women Voters warrant review and the Town Meeting Members Association, and you'll get